Injuries suck, and we had some big ones in week 11, not to mention some big busts. Let's talk about them and decide if this is something we should worry about going forward or if it was just a 1 week anomaly. Hey, let me remind you, if you still have not tried Underdog Fantasy, now is the time because all new customers are going to get this Patrick Mahomes special. He just needs to go higher than half a yard on Monday Night Football. You pair that with any other line or lines you like, and you can potentially 20x your entry. And if you join now using promo code ENDGAME when you sign up, not only are you going to get this new customer special, but they're also going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Take the money they give you, put it on the Mahomes line, throw in some other lines, and it potentially 20x your entry. And it didn't take long on Thursday Night Football in what was supposed to be finally a good Thursday night game. Instead, it turned into a fantasy nightmare. We sadly lost Joe Burrow for the season with a wrist injury. Did the rap he had on before the game preclude to this? Maybe, but does it really matter at this point? Not only is this a huge loss for anybody who had Joe Burrow as their QB1, but what about teams with Chase and even T. Higgins? We have to knock Chase down. As much as we'd like to believe that Jake Browning can be good enough, as we've seen with players like Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, he probably isn't. I don't think Chase is unstartable, but I think he has to be knocked down more to the wide receiver 2 range. As for T. Higgins, he might be unstartable. Maybe a flex with some upside or a wide receiver 3 play, but cannot feel good about T. Higgins. And if that wasn't enough, we also lost Mark Andrews for the season with an ankle injury. And unless you somehow have a decent tight end on your bench already, Andrews is going to be very hard to replace off the waiver wire. Just 2 brutal injuries that are going to be really tough to replace. On to the Sunday slate, the Chargers took on the Packers, and not only did the Chargers lose another winnable game, but they also had to watch in horror as their first-round rookie wide receiver, Quentin Johnston, dropped quite possibly the game-winning touchdown. I hate to say it, but at this point, he looks like a total bust. And then to add insult to injury, Eckler fumbled near the goal line and had a down game, but look, no panic here. It happens. On the Packers side, we had our next brutal injury. Aaron Jones had what looked like a terrible knee injury on a run on a tackle. He was carted off, had the towel over his head. This rarely ends well. Prayers up for Aaron Jones. I will say, if there's a silver lining, Matt LaFleur said he doesn't think it's season ending, so I guess there's that. Raiders took on the Dolphins and the hits just kept on coming in Vegas. Josh Jacobs went back to looking like a total plotter in a great spot. And hey, Jacoby Myers doubled his highest catch total with Aiden O'Connell, but it's still only 4 catches. He's pretty much unstartable as long as Aiden O'Connell is the quarterback. Then on the Dolphins side, we had our next big injury of the day. Just when we got Devon Achane back from IR, he re-injured his knee again. 2 touches, re-injured, never came back in. This is the risk that comes with a 180-pound running back. We'll have to see what the update is. Mike McDaniels didn't sound too concerned, but I mean, the same knee, first game back, you got to be a little worried. And Jalen Waddle continues to just be okay. With Tyreek going scorched earth right now, there just isn't a lot left over for Jalen Waddle. It's hard to see the name Jalen Waddle and not feel like he's an auto start, but he's definitely not one at this point. Cardinals went to Houston, and James Conner continues to dominate the backfield in touches, but he hasn't looked nearly as good as he did early in the year. But he's getting the volume, so it's hard to be overly panicked. Marquise Brown, on the other hand, has not really exploded since the return of Kyler Murray. 2 catches, 18 yards on only 5 targets. I will say this was a tough matchup, and his schedule does get much easier, but man, I'd really like to have seen some connection by now. I'm not full-fledged panic on Hollywood Brown yet, but I'm definitely getting nervous. And on the Texans side, they pretty much all came through with good to great games, as expected. Tennessee went to Jacksonville, and the Titans did hit DeAndre Hopkins on a trick play for a touchdown and also threw a touchdown to a defensive lineman because why not? But this was mostly pretty brutal for the Titans. 38 total snaps. 38! I mean, if you started Hopkins, congratulations, but you cannot feel good. This felt like one of the luckiest, flukiest touchdowns of the entire week. This offense really hasn't been much better with Will Levis than it was with Ryan Tannehill. And Derrick Henry? Oh boy, he's owned the Jaguars in his career, but today, not quite. He did catch 4 passes to at least salvage his day, but this version of Derrick Henry likely needs a faster-paced, better offense. And there just isn't a way for that to happen this year. I think we have to view Henry as a running back 2 from here on out. And as predicted, this was a bounce-back spot for the Jags and Trevor Lawrence. And did Pierre and I achieve legendary status by suggesting Calvin Ridley so much? we'll let you decide. Unfortunately, it was not a bounce back for Travis Etienne. This is now 2 down games in a row. After getting elite usage before the bye, the team has kind of lessened his work for some reason. Is he banged up? Is the team protecting him? We don't really know, but without that elite usage, we have to be a little bit concerned. Definitely not panicking yet, just more like nervous. The Cowboys went to Carolina, and while they didn't destroy the Panthers, they won pretty easily. And, Dak and CeeDee didn't quite go off this week, but they were more than fine. And, oh, hey, look, a Tony Pollard sighting. No, it wasn't a huge day, but at least he wasn't a total bust. But are we really back in on him after having just 12 carries? Probably not. But he does have another good matchup in Week 12 versus the Commanders, so you could probably roll him out again in that one. And on the Panthers side, Bryce Young continues to struggle, and now we have a true 50-50 split in this backfield. Just avoid this offense if you can. Adam Thielen is at least playable, I guess, but that's really about it. Giants went to Washington for easily the biggest upset of the day. Did not see this coming, and Tommy DeVito took 9 sacks. But still also somehow threw 3 touchdowns. That is not something you see almost ever. I guess for as much of a joke as the Giants' offense is, the Commanders' defense is an even bigger one right now. And even though Sam Howell wasn't good in real life, he did at least come through in fantasy, as did Brian Robinson, but Terry McLaurin, not so much. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great either. This is 2 down weeks in a row, but this is kind of what you get with him. No panic here, just understand the volatility. And then we go from the upset of the day to the comeback of the day. Chicago went to Detroit, and it looked like the Bears had this one, and I blinked, and they lost. But for fantasy, you have to feel pretty good about Justin Fields and DJ Moore after this one. And on the Lions side, does anyone remember Sam Laporta? He was like this rookie tight end who came out of the gates hot, looked like he was going to dominate fantasy in 2023, and then he just kind of disappeared. He hasn't gone over 9 PPR points in the last 2 games, both in great matchups. Maybe the emergence of Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game is hurting him. Maybe it's just a rookie lull. I'm not really sure, but I don't think we can consider him a no-doubt must-start anymore. Not saying to panic on him, but he's not necessarily a no-brainer. And then we went from the upset of the week to the comeback of the week to the ugliest game of the week. Pittsburgh went to Cleveland, and as predicted, this one was horrible. Unless you had Jaylen Warren. No, he didn't dominate the touches. In fact, he still had less touches than Najee Harris. But he did plenty with them, ripping off a huge touchdown and many other long runs. I still don't think he's ever going to fully take control of this backfield, but he certainly looks like the better start going forward. But if you had one of the receivers on the other hand, my goodness, a combined 6 catches for 54 yards on 14 targets. Every throw is to the perimeter. There is nothing over the middle in this offense. What are they doing? This is absolutely brutal. At this point, can we even start George Pickens or Deontay Johnson? I don't think so. And with rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the Browns' offense was predictably bad. But hey, David Njoku, 15 targets, so maybe he's at least still playable for a tight end. Jets went to Buffalo, and we did not get a repeat of Week 1. But we did get Zach Wilson benched for Tim Boyle. But it still didn't help. I mean, at least finally Garrett Wilson caught a couple passes, but then he fumbled. So yeah, there was that. Completely awful day for this offense. Somehow Breece Hall did find the end zone, but man, it feels like Breece Hall is just a guy who has to get receptions at this point, doing absolutely nothing on the ground. This offense can barely move the ball. You have to be panicked on this entire offense right now, and I don't think Tim Boyle is the answer. And then Josh Allen did bounce back in a big way, but Stephon Diggs was not the one who benefited. Back-to-back games of scoring less than 10 PPR points, but he did also play Patrick Surtain and Sauce Gardner in back-to-back games. No panic here at all. It's going to get better. Tampa went to San Francisco and it went about as expected. Evans and White kept scoring touchdowns. Godwin was just okay. Baker was mostly bad. Yeah, about as expected. And things went about as expected on the San Francisco side too. Purdy was great. Ayuk was great. Kittle was great. CMC was good. Debo was fine. Yeah, about as expected. And then finally, Seattle took on the Rams and oh hey, more injuries. Geno Smith left with an elbow injury and did not return. Kenneth Walker left the game with an oblique strain and did not return. And then Cooper Kupp re-injured the same ankle and did not return. If you didn't hear me say it the first time, I'll repeat it here. Injuries suck.